What made you Google the words menopause and suicide? Like, you'd already obviously put that together a little bit, had you?
I had. Just the fact that she was asking my daughter, because you probably know they sync up and all that sort of stuff, and I knew she was asking her, had she had her period, so she was obviously missing. And I thought, well, she's 52, maybe something's going on with that. So I thought about it and I thought, well, because she was going through what she's going through, I thought once she sort of comes better a bit, I'll take her to a doctor and get it looked at. But there was no time. It was that quick.
Today I'm joined by Craig. Lost his wife Debbie to suicide in 2019, and her death has been related to a psychotic depression brought on by the menopause. Craig and his family have very bravely set up a foundation in Debbie's honour called the Debbie Gaunt Foundation, and they're striving to change the face of education, not only for patients around mental health and the collision of symptoms that you often can see appearing in this time, but also trying to change the face of education of health professionals to make all of us a bit more aware of what can happen and how, unfortunately, catastrophically wrong things can go. I've seen lots of pictures of Debbie, which Craig has shared with me. She was vivacious, outgoing. Every photo, she's surrounded by people smiling and laughing. And it's incredibly tragic how Debbie's life came to a sudden and abrupt end. But hopefully, if you listen today, you're going to come away with some thoughts and ideas about how we can look after people and their mental health a little bit better. Let's get into it. I'd love you to tell our listeners a little bit about how you found yourself creating the foundation and what the story is behind it.
That was actually the launch of our new campaign. Our foundation started in 2020 when I lost my wife to suicide in 2019. And at the time, what she was going through and the age she was led me to sort of think about menopause.
What age was she?
She was 52.
52. Okay.
And as like most people, I didn't know anything about anything, but I knew she was asking my daughter about had her periods changed and that sort of stuff. And so I knew maybe it was something to do with that. So that only went from a normal, beautiful woman to gone in a couple of weeks. So first I just Googled menopause and suicide. And that's when an article came up from Jay Shree down in Monash about suicide and menopause.
So that was Professor Jay Ashry. And for any of our listeners listening, if you listen to episode 2, she's an incredible psychiatrist based in Melbourne, very world renowned because of her great expertise in hormones and mental health. So what made you Google the words menopause and suicide? Like, you'd already obviously put that together a little bit, had you?
I had. Just the fact that she was asking my daughter, because girls, I don't know if you probably know, they sync up and all that sort of stuff. And I knew she was asking her, had she had her period, so she was obviously missing. And I thought, well, she's 52, maybe something's going on with that. So I thought about it and I thought, well, because she was going through what she's going through, I thought once she sort of comes better a bit, I'll take her to a doctor and get it looked at.
Yeah.
But there was no time. It was that quick.
Okay. And Craig, so you contacted Jay Ashry, and what happened then next?
Well, when I saw that article, I just said, well, I just sent an email to her, and I just thought, well, that'll just go off to nowhere and never see it again. And then Anthony D. Costello, actually, I think it might have been on a Sunday, answered me back and said, that's exactly what the professor is looking at, and she'll get back to you. She's overseas.
So you wrote her an email sharing the story of Debbie and what had happened? Yes. Yeah. Okay. And who's Anthony?
Anthony D. Costello is the research manager of it was back then, it was a Alfred Research Centre, Monash Alfred Research Centre. So her centre now. Yeah, so he just said, the professor's overseas and she will get back to her, and she did. So she emailed back. So we packed up our stuff and got on a plane and flew down to Melbourne to see them.
And who's we?
Jack and I. Hayley couldn't go because she's working.
Okay, and so Jack, your son, how old's he?
Now? He is 24.
Okay. And so you headed off down to meet Jay Ashery and shared your story.
Yes.
Tell us what did she say, or what did she explain to you about what was going on?
She just went through everything, and she showed us through the clinic that they had down there and how they run their clinic, and just that it was only operating 1 day a month. And they said that was in 2019, and there was a waiting list of 280 women. And she explained how the hormones would have been affecting her, and the estrogen and all that sort of stuff would have been affecting her brain, and things that do happen to women. It was just an eye-opener. I'm going. So we just said, how can we help? We want to get more of these clinics. How can we help? So we sort of made a grand plan with them to get more clinics all around Australia, and we're still working on that today. So what's the first thing we can do was, they said, we're working on a online course to train doctors about this midlife crisis, and we need, I think it's $44,000 for this course to get it up and running. So right, yeah. So that's a good start for us. So I come back to the coast. I approached Sue Liptrop from the Iris Foundation and said, we want to set up a foundation and we want to raise $44,000. So I spoke to Monash. I said, well, I'll give you $20,000 to lock it in and say, yeah, we're serious about this, and then we'll go and fundraise the rest to give us a purpose and to raise awareness about what we're doing.
So you gave that out of your own pocket?
The 20,000, yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. And so they were able to create that course, and it's up and running now? That's
up and running now. You can go on our website now, and it's actually for everybody now. It's not just for GPs.
Yeah.
They've put it out there for everybody, yeah.
Craig, if we can step back a little bit in the story, tell us a little bit about what you can maybe see in hindsight was going on with Debbie. Like, do you think that she was seeming a bit more anxious, or it's just so our listeners can maybe be aware of maybe, a friend or a family or themselves, if they're feeling some of these symptoms that you think in hindsight may be relevant?
Yeah, in hindsight, you can sort of look back, but she was sick with the flu too, so that was masked a lot.
Yeah, sort of clouding the whole picture a little bit.
And because we had no idea what menopause or perimenopause, never knew what was happening, and probably she didn't either. But you could see she was sort of withdrawing from doing stuff. A few of her friends said she wouldn't make eye contact with them. And towards the end, it just turned into psychosis, sort of related to being hypnotised. Have you ever seen anyone hypnotised? You just lose the actual, like, say if you can eat an onion and you think it's an apple.
Yeah.
That's how easily the brain is tricked.
Right.
And I think that's
how she seemed to you.
That's how she was, yes.
Yeah. Was Debbie an anxious person or a depressed person in previous years, or was this a completely new thing for her?
No, she wasn't depressed. She was always a little bit paranoid of stuff. A little bit anxious, but not where you'd...
And paranoid in terms of that she would worry about what people were thinking, or if she'd done the wrong thing, or...
A little bit. Not bad that there'd be anything.
That you'd be worried about it.
Yeah, just nagging the kids and just normal stuff like that. But it just turned into full paranoid.
And do you think that whenever you look back in hindsight, was there any of those... everybody always thinks menopause and hot flushes, don't they? They always think of people having these hot flushes and fanning themselves. Were there any of those kind of symptoms was she sleeping okay and things like that?
I don't think she would, because I get up early for work, so I don't always go to bed early, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But I don't think she was, because she had a couple of weeks off work sick, and she wouldn't. Apparently, she rang up and got another week off as well, and she didn't sort of tell us.
Right. Okay.
So it was just that 2 or 3 week period.
Yeah.
But when you can look back, you can see she just wasn't herself before that as well.
Yeah. But it was not probably bad enough before that to really notice anything.
No, it's all. Jay Ashery says a lot of this is all retrospective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm presuming Jay Ashery said that she'd heard similar stories and had similar things happen to other patients before.
Yeah.
And I think one of the conversations you and I have had previously is that, there's a lot of focus, and rightly, that goes on to young men, particularly in suicide, but we don't perhaps hear about women committing suicide, but actually it's not as uncommon as we would like it to be. And we know, you and I have talked about this, that there's a real peak for women at this age to, you know, lose their home, lose their job, and lose their life.
Lose their families.
Yeah. And has that been a bit of a eye-opener for you? Like, is that something that you knew about before?
No. Well, you do see a lot of people break up at that sort of age too. There's just an eye-opener now, and you think, well, what, maybe something's going on.
Yeah.
But no one knows. Like, that's the trouble, is nobody knows what's happening, as you probably experience every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about your male friends? Like, do you feel like they have been sort of surprised and you know, have expressed that their lack of knowledge to you? Do your male friends chat with you about it all?
They do. So a lot of them are the same thing. They've all split up as well in that sort of age as well.
So lots of relationship breakdown.
Yeah,
it definitely is a real peak at this point. And, you know, as we've talked about on this podcast, I think that's going on for many reasons. You know, it can be obviously just relationship issues, but clearly, you know, women can be depressed, anxious, not sleeping, trying to juggle, you know, maybe teenage kids and a job and a house, and then, you know, add in lots of physical symptoms like, you know, joint pain and brain fog and feeling anxious or panicking, and your heart's racing and your ears are itchy and your skin's itchy, and, you know, having sex is painful, and, you know, you become really paranoid about your relationship, and the next thing, you know, the wheels are just falling off, you know.
Brain fog was a big one. She was all over the books and all over the accounting. She did the books for us, and she just couldn't, she looked at it and she just couldn't understand it anymore. Yeah. Within a couple of weeks.
Wow. So she had always done the accounting and bookkeeping for your business.
Yeah.
And then it just clearly became a bit of a challenge.
It's like she just couldn't comprehend it anymore.
Yeah.
It's what you call it, just like brain fog. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of women will express to me that that's one of their worst symptoms, is just feeling like they're no longer sort of on top of their game. I literally had 2 patients yesterday that I saw, both had very, very high profile jobs, and both told me they both retired at 57, interestingly, and for exactly the same reason. They just didn't feel they could do their job properly anymore. There's been quite a bit of research in the UK where they've actually, I think the government funded it just to look at how many women were leaving the workplace during this time. And it was absolutely jaw-dropping, you know, that so many women were dropping out of employment. And isn't that really so sad? Because you've got these women who really should be at the peak of their career, so much knowledge, so much experience, not having to deal with like tiny little toddlers at home anymore, probably ready to take their career to the next level. But then all these symptoms make it...
They've done all the hard work.
They've done all the hard work, and then, you know, it's like nearly like your body and your brain suddenly let you down.
And the government's answer was to give them a few weeks extra sick leave. It's like, wow, thanks.
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating. So where are you guys going on your journey, I suppose, as a foundation? What do you want to do with the Debbie Gaunt Foundation?
March last year, we met at Parliament House with the team from the Her Centre, and we submitted a proposal to Emma McBride down there, and that was to have a clinic in a new research centre here on the Sunshine Coast.
Wow. So
Sue from the Iris Foundation and I said, well, that's the top, we can't do anymore. We can only do that. So what do we do? So we went away and we said, well, we need to concentrate more on the mental health side of stuff. So we went out and said, what do we do? So, well, we need a digital marketing girl to help us. So we engaged Lindsay Johnson, and she rebranded all our stuff. We used to have the purple swans, and now we've got the new colours and everything. And we created a website, and we launched that when you came. That was in April, I think, was it? And that's been so successful. So the new way we're having, because when we started with the clinics and all that, that was before COVID. And I think COVID has changed everything, where telehealth is really changed everything. You know, you can be seeing a doctor in West Australia or something, because as you know, it's so hard to find a doctor that knows anything about perimenopause, hormones and all that sort of stuff. So I think telehealth is the big game changer because, as you know, you go to a normal doctor and they might give you antidepressants. I think our goal now is to work with you and get a platform where we can get mental health, we can get doctors, we can get physiotherapists, we can get all those people. Because I know with the physios, a lot of women coming in with all these complaints and stuff.
That's right. Their frozen shoulders and their hip pain.
Yeah.
It's the same. I kind of feel like, while we don't need everyone to become, obsessed with the menopause, that, as every health professional, but I think everyone needs to know a bit more. So if you're a cardiologist, then you might need to think that if this woman in front of you has palpitations, then maybe it's perimenopause. If you're an ophthalmologist and you've got someone in front of you and they've got dry eyes, then maybe it's their perimenopause. And I think, what you're trying to do is amazing because, again, I think so many women probably do end up at psychology appointments, but maybe we're ending up, and I'll put my hands up and say, I feel bad. And I know I talk to a lot of my sort of counterparts who are really involved in menopause, and we all feel bad because we think, gosh, in hindsight, we probably were putting people on antidepressants whenever we probably really would have been much better servicing the patient by prescribing hormones. But again, as you and I have talked about, we've got this whole generation of doctors who it's kind of been hammered into, don't prescribe hormones, they cause breast cancer, and it's actually trying to rewrite the script.
And that's actually been proved not to be true.
Absolutely. So, but unfortunately the thing is that the media definitely latches on to bad publicity. So they were very, very quick to report the WHI study, which has now been basically retracted. But even very recently, there was a very, very good meta-analysis. I think it was in The Lancet in the last month, basically saying that women on estrogen-only hormone replacement therapy had 20% less breast cancer. It got no traction whatsoever. I think it did make it to the Washington Post or something like that, but it didn't get much further than that. And it's interesting because bad news sells, they say.
Yes.
And it would seem that the positive opposite didn't really get any traction, which is definitely frustrating. I suppose the other question I have, Craig, is that have you been approached by any other families from the Central Coast or beyond with who've had similar experiences?
We've been approached by a lady in Melbourne. She actually came up all the way from Melbourne to our event. Not too much on the Central Coast, no.
Yeah, okay. And I know that we had our event together in Newcastle about a month ago, and we had a patient who'd flown down from Cairns, and thankfully she had got help and support before anything happened, like Debbie, but is very, very severely depressed and had never been like that in her whole life. So unfortunately, it's not uncommon. It's definitely much more common than people would like to think. And I think for anyone listening, my message would be, do you have a close eye on your friends? If you've got female friends, or if it's your mum or your auntie or whatever, and they're just not seeming themselves, don't just dismiss it and ignore it, because, just asking the right question might well really save someone's life.
And it's 40, it's not 50.
Yes, exactly.
It's 40 years old. It's not.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You're taught menopause is 50, and then you get some hot flushes, and you don't get your periods, and that's it. That's what you've been taught for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just not the case, and it's like tragic.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though the average age is 50, that means significant number of people have menopause at 45, which means, and if you're having perimenopausal symptoms for anything up to 10 years. That means that someone of 35 may well be having these symptoms. Yeah. And that's what I see every week in my clinic. It's not always just people in their 50s. In fact, it's people in their 40s and even some people in their 30s who are coming in and telling me that they feel so anxious that they can no longer drive their car anymore, or, people who've traveled their whole life and suddenly they're sitting on a plane waiting for it to take off, and they're having to talk themselves down because they're having such a panic attack that they want to run off the plane. So, the anxiety can be horrendous.
And the other thing, Shauna, is the PTSD, if you throw that in as well. That's where your resilience seems to take a bit of a hit. And that's when that can come as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of things getting unmasked. And even we had a podcast a few weeks ago, and it was around ADHD symptoms and how they get unmasked by the perimenopause, and how women can just be juggling everything. And then, they've probably got undiagnosed ADHD. And then the whole thing just sort of falls apart as well and spirals.
On Sunday morning, when I was out walking at Terrigal Beach, which is a local beach, I kept crossing paths with a number of women who all had vests on, just like me, weighted vests. And we all gave each other a bit of a knowing look, because these have become very, very popular in peri and postmenopausal women. You might not know what rucking is, but basically what it is walking with either a weighted vest or a weighted rucksack. I personally opt for the weighted vest because I find it very, very comfortable and very, very quick to put on. So for peri and postmenopausal women, there are definitely a number of health benefits that you can gain from walking with extra weight. One of the health concerns that many women have at this stage of life is developing heart disease. And unfortunately, we know in the postmenopause, the rates of heart disease for women really start to accelerate. So why might rucking or walking with weight change that? Well, basically, whenever you're walking with additional weight, it increases your heart rate more, and it basically makes your heart exercise a little bit harder. So hopefully making your heart a lot more healthy. So that's one of the benefits of rucking in comparison to standard walking. So if you're intrigued and ready to start rucking, my recommendation would be that you start low and go slow. So start by choosing a weight that is 5 to 10% of your body weight at maximum, and take it slowly. Go for maybe a 10 to 20 minute walk at first. Don't decide to go on a 5-hour hike the first time you strap on your weighted vest. So we've been chatting to our friends at Rucksack, and I've got a special discount code for you. So if you go to their website, which is www.rucksack.com, so RUKSAK.com, and use the code Shauna15, so that's SHAUNA 15, you're going to get a 15% discount. So whether you decide to go for a vest or whether you decide to go for one of their backpacks, either way, you're going to get 15% off. Now, let's get back into the episode.
So Craig, I think the other question I have for you is, obviously this has been such a personal journey for you and your children, who are now obviously adults. How are you guys going?
We're going great.
Yeah?
Sort of brings us together. We're a team. We're different to how we would have ever been. When you grow up and you want your kids to move out, and it's a real team, especially with Ella and Bryce. They're partners as well. We go away together, and we all in this together.
And do you think that having the foundation has given you guys something to strive towards?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Let's go back a little bit just to the men. What message do you think that we need to get out to husbands, partners, brothers? Like, what do you think they need to know? What have you learned that you wish that they would know?
I think it's up to us, Shauna, to build something that we can take and tell them. Just look out for your wife. She might have perimenopause.
Yeah.
I think we have to, I don't know how you'd say it, like build I think you said a course or just anything just to say, listen, these are the signs. These are checklists, maybe. No one's going to listen if you just say, hey, mate, your wife might be like, oh, if it doesn't affect you, you wouldn't listen. So when you turn 50, you get a bowel cancer thing comes out. So what if girls get one when they're 40, saying, listen, here's a bit of a checklist. This can be you, and it's not the end of the world. It's like, this is doom and gloom now because everyone's got the wrong information and it's just getting out of control. But if you get the message out early and it's controlled, it's fine. You see these women when they're 50, they're doing amazing stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the flip side of it is, the positive side is that quite good not having a period, quite honestly. And, there are amazing women in their 40s and 50s and beyond. I think Forbes had a list in the last couple of years of, top 50 over 50 women who are absolutely, trailblazers, starting businesses, changing the world, setting up charities, etc., etc. So, I think we don't want the message to be doom and gloom, but it'll continue to be doom and gloom until the reality is that we need to have a health system that's really sort of engaged and understanding of these women. And I suppose it's a whole society problem. It's not just a health system problem. It's that everyone starts talking about it.
It's all there. You don't have to invent anything. You don't have to, it's not like cancer, you don't have to cure anything. It's just getting the stuff that's there into place where it can be used. And education. And doctors, that's the biggest thing. As you know, you go to doctors and they will put you on antidepressants. They won't even consider. And the same with mental health professionals. They won't even consider it.
Yeah, it must be very frustrating for you to sit here and think that if things were different, how different things would be for your family.
No, you can't. Just think how different we can make it.
Do you feel like the foundation helps you get up in the morning?
Yeah.
Gives you something to strive for?
Yeah.
So what's next?
Well, like I was talking to you the other night, I think what we want to do is get like all the mental health, the doctors all together and educate them and get them working together. So you've got GPs and physios and all them working together. That's probably the best thing, because there's no use getting education out there if you go, okay, I'm struggling, what do I do? And you go, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
That's right.
Sure, yeah, so Shawnee, you're probably booked out for weeks. It's like, they're the stage now, they probably need help quickly.
Yeah.
And as I say, they're getting misdiagnosed. So that's probably our first thing, is trying to get the message to doctors.
Any doctors or nurses or physios or psychologists listening, watch this space, because we definitely have a few things up our sleeves, don't we, to
Yes.
try and educate in our local area, and obviously there are definitely some new and upcoming resources out there as well for anyone who's further afield, and we'll put some notes in our show notes about some resources that I think are really helpful. Craig, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience, or any messages that you would like to get out to not only our local community but our listeners worldwide?
There are apps out there now that you can get onto that log your periods and how you go. No, Aviana are working on one. They've got one out now. There's a Balance app, but that's in England. So Aviana are developing one that's going to be for Australia. That's pretty much finished. It's up and running now, but they'll be using telehealth as well. And that's a good thing to me moving forward, because what we want to do is say, if you go to a doctor, you can just hit a button and that'll send all your details, all what you've been doing. So your first consultation isn't just saying up who I am and what I've been doing. It's just like they already know. So by the time you get there, okay, this is what you are, this is what we've been doing, and it's just that doctor could be in Perth. I think that's a big game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be intimidating for someone who's already anxious and someone who's already feeling a bit down in the dumps to go to the doctor and, feel worried about what they're going to say.
Yep.
And I do think even, there's lots of checklists that you can even print off on the internet. Just print one of them off and just even tick your symptoms.
But that's if you fluke it and you get a doctor that knows anything too.
That's true.
So what's the chances, you reckon, you're a doctor? So what's the chances of getting a doctor that's going to say okay?
I don't know. I'm not sure what the odds would be, to be honest. I'd like to think that every day they're increasing.
So if you're Shauna and you go out there and you're going through the phone book and say, I think I've got perimenopausal, I think my hormones are issues, I've got depression, what are your chances of getting a doctor that's going to do the right thing?
I don't know. Not as high as I would like to think, to be honest. I think, we've ended up with a generation of doctors who genuinely are de-skilled in prescribing hormones. And what I will say, and what is hopeful, is that I get messages all the time, every day, from doctors asking, can they come and sit in with me for some consultations? Can they see what I'm doing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's really hopeful, because I think there is a generation of female doctors particularly who are really motivated and who are really interested. But I think it's unfortunately there can definitely be some mixed messaging about what the right thing to do is. And I think sometimes this group over here are promoting doing this and this group over here are promoting doing this, and I think sometimes that can be really, really challenging. And I think the other reality is, because of, I feel like we've lost 20 years of women's research. And the other issue is that in research generally, women tend to be excluded from medical research because, we might get pregnant, or we might be on the contraceptive pill, or So they actually tend to use men all the time in research and then extrapolate the data to women. And, I think that really there's been a real interesting turn of the tide. And I think more and more researchers and scientists are realizing that you just can't extrapolate the data. You can't just say, oh, well, that female is just like a small male, because clearly hormonally, etc., we're just very, very different. And I think that, it's going to be a really interesting space over the next 5 to 10 years. And I know I'm certainly very excited by, some of the research coming out, even regarding things that we didn't know before, like how the gut microbiome, which is basically the bugs that live in your gut, and we know that we've got a couple of kilos of those, how they change after the menopause. We know that things like your insulin and how you your body reacts to glucose changes significantly as well. And these are things that we didn't really know before. So what I am hopeful is that there is quite a lot of noise in this space generated at grassroots level by women who have just pretty much had enough. And although at times I have my misgivings about, social media and my kids being on their phones too much and me being on my phone too much, what I will say is that, there has been a rise of, some really incredible doctors who every day go on Instagram and educate and are really proactive in answering questions and giving women a safe space. So what I think is really positive in comparison to even 2 or 3 years ago, I think that it is being talked about. And the reality is, as I've run various menopause events and they all sell out. It shows you that there's this absolute appetite for information and facts. And I think women do feel a bit more empowered to be able to go into their doctor's appointment and say, well, actually, no, I don't want to have an antidepressant. I know that I don't have depression. I really feel this is my hormones. And I think, we just need to keep getting that message out there. And I think the reality is that if I have lots of patients coming in and saying one specific thing to me, well, it's going to make me go, okay, well, they're obviously finding this information out from somewhere. And, I do think that the vast majority of doctors are good and are motivated, and hopefully they will go away and try and find that information. But I think the easier we can make that for people, the better.
That's our job.
Yeah. As I've said to you before, in defense of health professionals and, all GPs, like the amount of information that we have to constantly stay up to date with is just phenomenal. Like you literally could be studying every night and never get through it all. So I think what we can do to simplify it, break it down, and point people in the direction of resources that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's the other thing. There are some great resources out there, which I say I'll have in my show notes, that have good information leaflets or a quick start guide to starting HRT with your patients and things like that. So they don't have to go and do all that research themselves. Someone else has already done it for them. And it's just, I think, up to you and I and others to just help direct people to those resources. And I've really loved and appreciated meeting you, Craig. I think you were really inspirational, and your kids are inspirational, what they've done. You've tried to turn something which is obviously horrendously heartbreaking and life-changing for you all into something that hopefully is such an amazing legacy for Debbie. And I just want to say that I think you guys are incredible, and I'm really proud to at least try and help you a little bit.
Thank you. We're here to help you, and the more we help you, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think we've got a pretty good team happening together with her centre and all the doctors that are getting on board now. I think it's just growing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think unfortunately it's sometimes takes such a really sad and dramatic story for maybe people to actually stop and really go, okay, this is not just about a few hot flushes and, people putting on a bit of weight. Like, it's so much more than that.
It is.
And it, one of the things I always say to patients is that, I feel like in ways I run a confidence clinic, because I see women coming in and their confidence is rock bottom in every aspect of their life. Their confidence in being able to go to bed and actually just go to sleep, something that a lot of people just take for granted. to know that you're not tossing and turning and lying there all night, the confidence to know that, you know, you're going to be able to do your job and not be stuck in a meeting where you can't think what you're meant to be saying. You know, the confidence to know that, you know, your bladder's not going to let you down whenever you're on the train and you can't get to the bathroom in time. And I feel like, you know, if we can just sort of see it like that we're all kind of working to get these women back to a level of confidence where they can go off and absolutely thrive in the last part of their life.
You know, what we were saying before, we need to figure out how we can get out to the men because they want to know. So I liken to when I was born, men didn't go and watch their children get born.
Yeah, that's right. My dad didn't see myself or my sister be born. They weren't allowed, actually.
That's what I mean. Like, that's not that long ago.
Yeah.
That's how...
I'm really young, thanks for that.
Yeah, and look at guys now, they wouldn't miss it.
Yeah, I know.
So this is the same. I think this is the same. But men want to know. They want to help their partners, but they don't know.
Yeah.
And that's our job, to get out there and find a way how
to
get this out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's I hadn't actually thought of that. That's such a good analogy because you're right. I mean, when you think of it now, it's very routine for men to go to all the maternity appointments and go, you know, they wouldn't miss the birth for all the world. And yet 40 years ago, absolutely, completely, you know, you wouldn't have seen a man at a hospital appointment ever.
Yeah, that's like, we want to know. Like, we don't, the women are just sort of, it's got a stigma around it. They think, oh, we're menopause, we're done for, and just, you need to explain it's not like that at all, and don't be ashamed of it. Just, we want to help.
What we see on screens, on TVs, on movies, it does kind of perpetuate that feeling of when you're a certain age and you're female, that you're not really that important anymore.
Well, that's what it's been. Like, that's what you've been taught.
You know, you can have like Tom Cruise, but you can't have Kelly from Top Gun. She didn't get to be in the next Top Gun because she was too old.
But that's our job, you know. We've taken it on, and
I'm proud of you, Craig. Well, I think it's going to be really interesting for everyone to watch this space and see. I think that with you guys at the helm, the Debbie Gaunt Foundation is hopefully going to change the face of menopause care, especially around mental health. And I think, you know, you bravely coming on the podcast today and sharing a very difficult story about what happened to Debbie, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, the next things we're aiming for is her centre have got an event in October. We're hopefully getting down to that. You know more about that too.
Yeah, so the Her Centre are having, last year they had an inaugural Australian Pacific Women's Mental Health Conference. It was amazing. I went there last year. It was a meeting of so many minds. It wasn't actually just doctors and nurses. It was people from all sorts of industries. It was people who run businesses or work in HR. I mean, it was really trying to educate so many women and so many businesses as to how they could support women at this time of life. So I think you're going to love that conference. It's fantastic. Again, we will share a little bit more information in our show notes. Anyone listening who has any interest in this space, whether you're a personal trainer, an OT, a physiotherapist, exercise physiologist, a doctor, a nurse, a cosmetic doctor, like anyone in this space has got something to gain. If you work in HR in a business, you know, I just think you've got something to learn. The conference is friendly, it's inspiring. They've got some incredible people coming from all around the world and all around Australia to speak. So
we're coming.
You get to meet Craig.
We're pretty
family.
incredible.
You're ready to go? Awesome.
Pretty
Alrighty. Was there anything else, Craig, that you wanted to share before we finish off today?
Just what we were talking about before, about getting a conference together with all the health professionals and doctors and getting them working together.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that Craig and I have been chatting about is, with the help of the Iris Foundation, is trying to pull together a conference in our local area to really support other health professionals, you know, so that we can give them a little bit of a crash course and just really increase people's radar for these symptoms. And, you know, hopefully if you're listening further afield or overseas, get in touch and we'll give you the blueprint of what we're doing. And then we can maybe start a bit of a worldwide trend where people can create these conferences and and get-togethers in their community, and we kind of spread it like that, you know, from a grassroots level.
And if you come, I'll have a beer with everyone that comes.
Amazing. Thank you, Craig. You've been awesome and so generous.
Having me.
You're so welcome. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.